Arizona News Radio. Pinal County Sheriff's Office shuts down a drug stash house in Phoenix and arrests 5.
There were about 482 pounds of marijuana discovered in a truck that also had the people that were used to smuggle the drugs across the desert.
Customs and Border Protection officers at Nogales arrest a woman. 65 pounds of meth found hidden in her pickup truck.
Indeed, it was unique. 65 pounds worth? Boy, you're talking about a good chunk of money.
Maricopa County Attorney Bill Montgomery says no more charges in the Hamilton High School football hazing case. They don't have enough witnesses.
Without admissible evidence to corroborate the information for us to present to a jury and convince a jury of guilt beyond a reasonable doubt, there's nothing more we can do.
Officials in southern Arizona looking for another possible victim. Fox attacked at Soar National Park East outside of Tucson.
The fox bit a tire, grabbed onto the sticker of one of the 2 bicyclists, and then a third woman, not part of their party, approached, tried to spray it with a water bottle.
George Tanner, Arizona News.
It's time for your 1100 KFNX traffic report, brought to you by FEMA and the Ad Council. Taking a look out to Phoenix, we have an accident at State Route 51 southbound at Northern Ave, as well as the I-10 westbound at Loop 202, and a collision at Loop 101 westbound at 35th Ave. When danger is imminent, will you be prepared? Now many mobile devices can bring you critical information from local sources you trust. Learn more at ready.gov/alerts.
From the KFNX WeatherBug Weather Center, as we head into the evening under cloudy skies, showers likely, overnight low 53. Tomorrow, mostly cloudy with a chance of showers, high 65. Thursday night, mostly cloudy, a chance of showers, overnight low 50. I'm Scott Allen Fortney from the KFNX WeatherBug Weather Center.
Currently, in downtown Phoenix, it's 60 degrees.
Next news in 30 minutes or when it breaks, here on Independent Talk, 1100 KFNX.
It's time for an upgrade. Get to the Nissan Now sales event for big President's Day savings on the technology of tomorrow, available now. Save big on our entire lineup, like the 2018 Rogue with ProPilot Assist that helps keep you centered in your lane. And Titan, backed by America's best bumper-to-bumper limited truck warranty. Hurry in to Nissan now and save on our most intelligent lineup ever. Exclusive President's Day offers end soon. Now, get up to $10,323 off MSRP on the 2017 Nissan Titan. Now as low as $19,257. Get to this can't-miss event now. Shop ChooseNissan.com and your local Nissan dealer today. For well-qualified buyers, starting MSRP $29,580. Savings includes $5,750 cash back, $2,000 bonus cash, $2,573 average dealer discount on select trim. Excludes tax, title, license. Dealer sets actual prices. Take from new dealer stock. ProPilot Assist available feature and can't prevent collisions. Always monitor traffic conditions. Keep both hands on steering wheel. See owner's manual or call 1-888-858-8319 for safety information, terms, and details on limited truck warranty information. Ends 2/28.
Live from the Midtown studios of KFNX, it's time for the Wellness Roundtable radio show, sponsored by Atrix.com. Now, here's your hosts, Dr. Spear and Dr. White.
Happy Wednesday. Welcome to the Wellness Roundtable radio show, here straight from Phoenix. Hi, Scott. How are you today?
Dave, I'm doing great. I'm excited for today's show.
I am too. So I want to welcome all of the people who are watching us on Facebook. And it's a little bit bittersweet today, Scott. And the sweetness is that we have an extended play show, which is going to run about 90 minutes. And the bitter part is that there's been a tremendous tragedy in Broward County in Florida where there was a school shooting. So I just wanted to let our audience know that we will be breaking for a press release if that happens to take place during our show. So my prayers and my thoughts go out to everybody in Broward County.
Yeah, in Parkland. I think that was in Parkland, Dave.
Yeah. So, okay. So, without further ado, and I don't think we need to kind of go through our current events segment because we do have a lot to talk about. I'd like to introduce our guests, and then get right to the main topic. What do you think?
I think that'll be great.
Okay. So, our first guest is Stuart Burton. He's a celebrity trainer, owner of Stuart Burton's Iron and Silk Fitness Training Center in Lower Manhattan, and is the creator of the Safe Method of Training. You can find out more about his facility and more about him at ironandsilkfitness.com. Our second guest is Jerry Brainham, who is a former bodybuilder and science editor of Muscle and Fitness magazine and a nutritional consultant to elite athletes. Currently, he is the editor-in-chief of the Applied Metabolic newsletter, which can be found at appliedmetabolics.com. And our third guest, we have a large group today, is Ming Chu, who is a former bodybuilding champion, currently a physical therapist in New York City, who specializes in soft tissue rehabilitation. And you can learn more about Ming at mingmethod.com. Welcome, everyone.
Hey, thank you.
Hello.
So we're really looking forward to this show because the main topic of the show is really busting common fitness workout myths, or fitness myths and workout myths, really. And, it's funny because when Scott and I came up with the idea for Wellness Roundtable, really the idea germinated out of this kind of Wild West mentality where people say something, you get enough people to sort of believe it, and then it becomes truth. Even though it hasn't really been authenticated, even though it hasn't really been studied, it just happens to be kind of when the court of public opinion kind of agrees with it, it happens to be true. So we picked 4 myths today that we really want to delve into pretty deep from each of your perspectives and really educate the audience as to what's really going on here, both from the perspective of training, the perspective of rehabilitation, myofascial release, and the perspective of nutrition as well. So let's get started. The first myth that we have that we'd like to discuss is that big muscles equal strong muscles. And as I know that, through my education, going through, different physiology courses and things of that nature, it was always a myth that was kind of perpetuated, that if your muscles are big, they're strong. So I'd like to talk to Stu first and just find out where does that come from and why is that true or why isn't it true?
Well, I think first of all, most people, if they see someone, a male looking at another male, the exercise that they would see, let's say on the body, the skeletal structure, the muscles, it signifies power. You see somebody with some more muscles, and you think, oh, this person is got to be stronger than I am. When in actuality, it's really not the truth. There are a couple of things that we have to go into to really understand that, there's leverage. Leverage plays a large role in strength, and also muscular development doesn't mean that you have a lot of power unless you're training with enough progressive resistance in order for those muscles to actually be strong. If you're predispositioned to, let's say, acquire muscle at a good rate and or to build muscle, using a light weight and pumping and getting a lot of blood into that area could attribute to more size, but not necessarily strength. And Jerry just did a study on this recently, and we found and we've discussed it before that you can build muscle without lifting heavy, but the problem is that you're not going to have a stronger muscle. Mm-hmm. Now, if you were a person that was, let's say, not into training, and you start to train and your muscle starts to grow, yeah, you're going to get some muscle growth. You're going to get some strength that's going to accompany that. But if you see someone down the street with like a 22-inch arm, a 19-inch arm, it doesn't necessarily mean that person is any stronger with someone that has a 17-inch arm or a 15-inch arm. Ligament, tendon, bone insertion, the ability to move weight, technique, all of those things have to be factored in.
And so,
Stu,
yeah.
Stu, isn't it true though that you take a the bigger cross-sectional area of a muscle can develop more force? In addition to the fact there is also absolute and relative strength.
Correct. And that's what I was going to talk about. Yeah.
Yeah, which are factors that I think need to be brought into that.
Absolutely, because as an athlete gets stronger, actually the strongest people on the planet are the smaller people. It's not the super heavyweights that you see. What Scott's talking about is relative and absolute strength. Relative
Correct.
strength, right, is let's say I start to lift, and if I'm lifting weight, let's say my own body weight, and it's the same Stewie, and I put on an extra 50 or 60 pounds, I could probably absolutely outlift that Stewie that has less body weight. I can lift more weight than him. So where he would lift, let's say, 50 pounds, I can lift 100 pounds. But but relative strength, going in now, you start to see that this person can actually outperform that person that is actually larger. So you can compare someone like a gymnast that's training. But if that gymnast starts to gain weight, he's putting on muscular size, even though he's staying lean, what's going to happen is his overall strength, it's going to decrease a little bit. He might be absolutely more strong, but relatively weaker. And
his body weight.
Right, correct. And this is something, that you see all the time. So if you look at some of the women, weightlifters, and you're looking at even some of the men that are putting up triple body weight, or double body weight, and if you look at what they're lifting in relationship to how much they weigh, they actually are stronger than a lot of super heavyweights that are coming in at 340 pounds, let's say, or, and that are lifting. If you look at it, you say, oh, wow, this guy's putting up 900 pounds. Yes, that's amazing for the human body to be doing things like that, but someone else coming in and putting up 600 pounds at 142 pound body weight, just to give you an idea,
wow.
Wow. That's a lot stronger.
Right, absolutely. It's a relative percentage based on the individual's weight.
Right.
Yeah, for sure. Okay. So from a nutrition standpoint, Jerry, I know that there's different ways, I guess, to build muscle. There's different types of muscle, right? There's muscle that's quality muscle and muscle that's kind of like, for lack of a better term, messy or low quality muscle. What kind of nutritional practice builds what kind of muscle?
Well, I'm not sure what you mean by messy muscle. You'd have to define.
That was that wasn't really the right term. But what I'm talking about is not really quality muscle. So just bigger, but not necessarily.
Okay, so in other words, you're talking about, for example, a person who years ago they had the common practice in bodybuilding of bulking up, where in between contests, bodybuilders would just shove food in their mouth to eat an excess amount of calories, and as they gained weight, their strength went up. And they did put muscle size on, but they also put some fat on.
Right.
So, they got bigger, but they didn't look that good because there was no muscular definition at all. I think that are you referring to something like that?
I am. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, basically that's the reason that practice fell out of favor, because it became obvious after a couple of years that, if you put on 40 pounds after a contest, that 40 pounds is not going to be muscle if it comes from constant eating, for example, high-calorie foods and overconsumption of calories. And when you do diet down to get in top shape, you're going to just lose a lot of body fat. And when it turns out you really haven't gained much size anyway. So now the practice is of the current practice of competitive bodybuilders is to put on, you can't stay at a 5 or 3, let's say 4 or 5, 6% body fat all year. It's very bad for your health.
No way.
It's very bad, hard on the nervous system.
Sure.
Nobody can do it. So what happens is the bodybuilders relax the diets after the contest, and they gain some weight, but they never let themselves get to the point where they're virtually obese. In fact, there's a term that's used now called reverse dieting. And what this refers to is, most of the bodybuilders, of course, it varies with individuals as far as the specific diets they use. Some guys or women like low-carb diets. Others like low-fat, higher-carb diets. The commonality, of course, is a reduction in total caloric intake with an increased activity. That's how you lose the body fat. But what they do now is after the contest ends, instead of just shoving food down their mouth like they used to do in the past, what they do now is gradually add calories in a very gradual fashion, and this allows them to, let's say, recover from the stringent contest dieting, but it allows the body to get used to the additional calories so that the fat gain is minimal. And again, the term for this is reverse dieting. And to put it simply, it allows your metabolism to adjust, because I just wrote a couple of articles about what happens to bodybuilders and fitness athletes who diet strictly. They all show deficits or lowered resting metabolic rates. So obviously, if you have a lowered metabolic rate right after a contest and you start shoveling food, you're almost guaranteed to put fat on. But by doing this kind of reverse dieting type of situation, by gradually adding the calories, let's say every 2 days, it depends on the individual, you're allowing your metabolism to adjust to those additional calories, so your metabolism gradually rises, so the fat gain is minimal. And again, you don't lose any muscle, you maintain quality muscle. That's the most sensible way to do it now.
That's actually really smart. Yeah. Yeah. Scott.
Dave, I think I think the key point that he's really just defining is that size and girth doesn't equal strength.
Right.
Because there can be many of the factors that can be the variables in size, but it doesn't translate into strength.
Right.
Well, I could, is that me who just said that?
No, that was Scott.
No, that was Scott, Jerry.
Oh, Scott. Okay, Scott. Well, let me give you 2 quick examples to underscore what you just said. As scientists, I'm sure you're aware, when a person begins weight training, for the first 2 or 3 months, no matter what the sex, well, although this varies a little bit with women, usually the gains come mainly in strength rather than muscle size. In other words, strength comes first, followed by muscle size. Why is this? Because what happens is when you first start working out, you kind of fine-tune your neuromuscular connections between the brain and the muscle, and this tighter neuromuscular response allows you to contract the muscles harder, and, you get stronger. But, the size... the size follows the strength. So in other words, the strength and the size gains are not necessarily at the same time. So that's one example. The second example I'd give is my personal experience, and the other guys I'm sure know, have seen this too, is that you see a lot of these top competitive bodybuilders, the pro bodybuilders. I've interviewed countless, when I worked for the magazines, I lost count. I could hundreds of them. And I've seen them train. I trained with them. I trained with Arnold Schwarzenegger. The weights they use don't match their muscle size. In other words, you would expect a guy with a 22-inch arm or a 21-inch arm to be like doing barbell curls with 200 pounds. But the truth is, when I trained arms with Arnold Schwarzenegger, I'm not going to deny his arms were a lot bigger than mine, but on an exercise called preacher bench, Arnold could only use 100 pounds. I was using 125, which really annoyed the hell out of him because his arms were twice as big as mine. But I actually had more bicep strength than he did. And, so that's just an example, just underscoring the fact that large muscles do not necessarily equate to having a great amount of strength.
Got it.
Right.
Excellent.
So, I'd like to actually just say something about that too. With what Jerry's talking about, a lot of times you'll see guys that when they back off on weight and they pay a little bit more attention to technique and form, you'll notice that they get better size, better growth, and female. A lot of times, just moving the weight, you're not moving the weight properly. And again, like leverage systems, technique, these things, you can't overlook it, especially when you're trying to maximize whatever it is you're trying to be. You don't even have to be trying to be Mr. Olympia. You can just want to try and look good to go to the beach or look good just for yourself. But there comes a point in the time where you have to start to really look very closely at technique and start to understand, how you want to move that weight in order to activate those fibers properly.
I think that's an excellent point. And I think that goes to the point of, that if you move correctly, your performance in anything that is athletic or that is physical will be improved. So it is all about the movement. And so that kind of segues us up into, talking a little bit more about the rehabilitation, or maybe what you see as a physical therapist, Ming. Do you see, I'm assuming you see people who are, from various backgrounds in terms of their training and their nutrition, and maybe you see certain quality muscle. Do you see like certain injuries that relate to people who have poor quality muscle or don't train properly?
This is Ming Chu speaking here, the physical therapist. Yeah, I do see things. The most prevalent thing that I see, particularly with people who are working out a lot, is they have an unbelievable amount of tight tissue, adhesions, densified tissue, which really impairs their strength. They can actually be pretty big and muscular, but you can see that they can have problems. I had a patient that came in the other day. He was a pretty muscular fella, a small guy. He wasn't that tall, but he was very thick and muscular for his size. But he basically hurt his arm. He can barely curl like a 10-pound dumbbell. And as far as the rehab of that was concerned, it was actually an easy way to cure that, because all I had to do was trail down the problem that stemmed from his neck all the way down to his biceps. So basically what I'm saying is that if a person wants to get big and strong muscles, you really have to make sure that you have high fascial integrity. That's a word I made up. And you also have to have the muscles fire properly based on the quality of the nervous system as well. And fortunately for us, at least for me, the nervous system is also directly correlated to the quality of your fascia. So if you have tight, adhesed fascia, it chokes down on the nerves. Let's say for the biceps, in his case, C5 and C6 gets choked down at the nerve root. And if you traverse it all the way down to the brachial plexus, all the way down into the musculocutaneous nerve, which is the nerve that supplies the muscle of the bicep itself. And if you release all of these things, his arm literally, there's no exaggeration, improved by around 70% in terms of his strength within one treatment. So that's a case where a guy was actually injured where he can barely, curl 5 pounds, and all of a sudden he was like curling 25-pound, 30-pound dumbbells at no problem after the treatment. So in that sense, big muscles can still theoretically be very weak if it's not properly worked upon. Like if you have these faulty tissues and faulty nerves, it just simply won't work well. So, but all things being equal, getting back to a regular population, I always tell my patients, you can never have too much muscle, you can never have too much money, you can never be too good looking. So I say that all things being equal, building a little bit of muscle is a good thing for the average person.
Absolutely.
Okay.
Ming, to echo what you're saying, I was just talking to somebody recently explaining to them something similar to what you were just saying, that, not only hands-on therapy, but from a PT's point of view, as you are, releasing that tissue and making sure the joint can go through a full range of motion can really improve somebody's strength and neurological function.
Instantaneously.
And, I don't think people realize that, it's just as important to go to your trainer as it is important to go to your therapist. Because if you're moving right, you're going to facilitate greater growth in your muscle all over the body, male and female.
So let's take that point for a second. So I'm somebody who, let's say, is starting, I'm looking to work out. I want to, I'm a young guy. I want to get in shape. How do I know that I have good fascial integrity? How do I test that?
Very simple. What you do is you put them through, I have a screening that I do when a person comes into my office. I usually do a 90-minute session, which is very unusual for physical therapy sessions. Most PT clinics do, 20, 30-minute sessions, and maybe the initial session they'll do like 40 minutes. But my initial session is 90 minutes long, and it takes 30 minutes just to talk to the person and also do an evaluation. And basically what I do is I ask the person where your pain is, what your issues are, and then I do a manual muscle test on every single muscle. I do it quickly, though. It just takes a few minutes. And you figure out kind of quickly where the restrictions are. And when you do range of motion testing on top of that, you get a pretty good picture based on what they tell you and what you find exactly where the problems are. And once you find the problems, it's actually fairly simple. You just simply release the entire kinetic chain from top to bottom, and usually within 1 to 4 sessions, you can cure almost any problem. And I certainly recommend that young trainees or people who are getting back into the gym for the first time, they think that, jumping into a routine right away is the way to get in shape. You see this happen, with people who have resolutions. They go into the gym without any preparatory work. I strongly believe before you even get your butt into the gym, you have to be fully hydrated properly. Then you have to get your fascial integrity up to par, meaning getting the tissue worked on, even before you visit your personal trainer. So that's what I would advise people who are trying to get back in shape, or first-time people that are trying to get into the gym to get in shape for the first time.
Right.
Yeah, I totally agree. Just to touch on that a little bit, personally myself and what we do with our clients at Iron and Silk, we want to make sure that when they come inside, we're letting them know the prep is, hydration. We're, based off of individual sizes, we're telling them they need to take in X amount of water just to make sure, telling them how to consume that water, not consuming it in large amounts, because then a lot of times they come in dehydrated. That they want to, you want to drink, small amounts throughout the day. Getting a profile of nutritionally what's going on. I can't say it enough. The reason why, Iron and Silk thrives is because it's program based. You can't just come in and think you're going to lift weights. And I'm a bodybuilder, and I competed with the NPC and the IFBB, and, it's something that's dear to me. But we also have to look at the majority of people that are coming in, they're very misinformed. and they don't have a lot of years of experience behind the training. They just think because they can move, they want to get in and move. I say move correctly, and make sure that you're doing the right things around the table. So, hydration, again, like what Ming was saying, super important. You have to have flexibility and pliability to the fibers. Right. And this is something, again, that we stress immensely. You're not going to go in and push the body hard and not only, think that you're going to lift weights. Same thing with a yoga instructor coming in and doing yoga. I do a lot of rehab with people that are coming in, yoga instructors, because we get a lot of range of motion. But then there's no power with the range of motion that they can get moving back into a position, or a fighter, coming from a posted up position and then coming out of that position and being relaxed. A lot of these things you have to be able to understand that it works best when it's implemented in a system setting. There's got to be some of that.
Yep.
Let me chime in right here. This is Ming again. I have a very simple rule. There's a lot of formulas that are out there to address people's hydration issues, but I have a very simple rule. 2 liters is the starting point for everyone. 2 liters is basically, 2 quarts or, 8 glasses, however you want to put it. But 2 liters of water is the starting point for most people. Let's say you're an average male that weighs 175 pounds, and, 2 liters is a good starting point. If you work out 3-4 days a week, I suggest you drink a little bit more than 2 liters of water a day. It could be like 2.25, 2.5 liters of water. If you're big, like Stuart or like Jerry, they're big dudes, they're big fellas that weigh over 230, 240. You can go as high as 3 liters of water a day. If you're a smaller female, you can go as little as 1.7 liters of water a day. I recommend pure, filtered water.
We'll be right back. We're finishing our first segment. Stay with us.
News you won't get anywhere else. Independent Talk 1100 KFNX. Fair and balanced. Independent Talk 1100 KFNX.
Special report, Florida high school shooting.
This is a terrible day for Parkland, Broward County, the state of Florida, and the United States.
Broward County Sheriff Scott Israel on the tragedy that has shaken Parkland, Florida, where gunfire erupted at the Marjorie Stoneman Douglas High School north of Miami. Correspondent Brian Todd reports at least 14 people were taken to area hospitals.
Now, the father of one student says his daughter told him there was, quote, blood all over the place in the wake of this shooting. Law enforcement sources telling CNN there are at least 2 fatalities.
Teacher Melissa Felkowski says she and 19 students took shelter in a closet for an emotional 40 minutes.
They're holding it together, it was a little bit more stressful and harder, when we were in the closet and, they were crying and panicking. And
authorities say the shooter is in custody and had attended the school at one time. The circumstances at this hour are not known. I'm Barbara Cusack.
From the KFNX WeatherBug Weather Center, as we head into the evening under cloudy skies, showers likely, overnight low 53. Tomorrow, mostly cloudy with a chance of showers, high 65. Thursday night, mostly cloudy, a chance of showers, overnight low 50. I'm Scott Allen Fortney from the KFNX WeatherBug Weather Center.
Currently, in downtown Phoenix, it's 58 degrees.
Next news in 30 minutes or when it breaks. Here on Independent Talk, 1100 KFNX.
Atrix is one of the fastest growing companies in the footwear industry and is widely recognized as a global leader in comfort and wellness footwear products. The Atrix mission is to create the healthiest shoe on the market today with fashion, function, and quality at the forefront. Atrix designs and manufactures most types of footwear for both men and women. All styles are crafted with care to meet the highest standards in design, incorporate cutting-edge technologies, and offer unmatched customization and adjustability. To learn how Atrix can help you with your feet, go to AETREX.com. That's Atrix.com.
Calling all voters in Surprise, Sun City, Peoria, Litchfield Park, New River, and Waddell. You live in District 8. The Northwest Valley League of Women Voters wants to remind you to get out and vote in your special primary election to fill the seat vacated by Trent Franks. Primary election day is Tuesday, February 27th. Bring a photo ID or 2 other forms of ID. For more info, visit maricopa.vote. That's maricopa.vote.
The Renaissance Festival is back! Huzzah! Weekends now through April 1st.
You love the Renaissance
Renaissance Festival.
Great shopping, a giant crafts market.
Welcome to the Renaissance Festival.
New shows, non-stop feasting. The Renaissance Festival is back. Weekends now through April 1st. Get great savings with coupons at participating Wendy's, Cobblestone Auto Spa, and Hall of Frames while supplies last. Don't miss the Renaissance Festival.
Celebrating 30 years of cheers.
Do you suffer from foot pain? Let Atrex help alleviate some of that pain with a pair of Atrex orthotics. Millions of pairs have been sold to those in need of fast relief from foot pain. Atrex offers a wide selection of orthotics designed for each arch type and footwear style. Visit Atrex.com. That's AETREX.com and get your pair today. Again, that's AETREX.com.
Don't we all have questions about our health, fitness, or even injuries? Now there's a place to go, and it's online at wellnessroundtable.com. Wellnessroundtable.com is an online interactive video platform that allows the best experts in the world to share their knowledge with you. Through creating a roundtable or attending a lecture, you are bound to realize the value of having evidence-based information live and in the comfort of your own home. Check them out at wellnessroundtable.com and get some real answers. Use the promo code 1100 to get a 20% discount.
Welcome back to the Wellness Roundtable Radio Show. We are here busting some fitness and workout myths, and we're speaking with the pros, Stuart Burton, Jerry Brainham, and Ming Chu. And Ming, I just want to kind of apologize. I kind of cut you off because we broke from our first segment, but you were talking about hydration, and you were making some very, very specific recommendations. So
Sure. Basically, before I even treat my patients, as I think most trainers should do with their clients, the client should be, or the patient should be hydrated before they even come into the office or to the gym. And I have a very, very simple rule to keep it as simple as possible so people can actually follow it. I always tell people to start off with 2 liters. Mm-hmm. Even if you're a female, you drink 2 liters of filtered water, pure water. I'm not talking about bubbly water or vitamin water or juices. I'm talking about pure water. And that water should be had on an empty stomach. It is believed, in Europe at least, Dr. Guy Voyer would say that if you drank water on an empty stomach, it goes into the extracellular space, which is the space where the connective tissue lives, and that you want to hydrate all the connective tissue before you start training. So 2 liters is where I would start. If you're as large and as massive as Stuart and Jerry over here, you can go up to 2.5 or even 3 liters of water. I weigh about 202 pounds personally, and I work out about 4 times a week. I drink between 2 to 3 liters of purified water every day, and I always drink it on an empty stomach. And that's a very simple rule to follow. I recommend everyone do it.
2 questions for you. So you work out in the morning, 5:30. When do you start hydrating? In other words,
I wake up. I literally drink. I'm a little of a strange bird, but this is how I do it. I drink a full liter of water even before I leave and before I have breakfast. I usually wake up early in the morning. I'll drink 2 cups of water. I'll wait a few minutes, and I'll drink another 2 cups of water, and I'll wait another 15, 20 minutes, then I'll have my breakfast. I always drink my water, particularly before a meal. I usually love drinking water at least 15 to 20 minutes before a meal because it does not interfere with the enzymes when your body's trying to digest, so you just push the water through. And I already got my 1 liter out the way. So for the next few hours, the next 16 hours that I'm awake, I try to get another 1 to 2 liters after that. Usually on days that I train, I tend to drink more, and usually on days that I don't train, I tend to drink a little less.
Okay. So, I mean, that was fantastic. I mean, just really talking about in-depth quality muscle, how we achieve quality muscle, the nutrition necessary for quality muscle, and the importance of really hydrating fascia and really kind of almost kind of a pre-workout kind of routine. So now what I'd like to discuss is something that's a little bit more near and dear to me because I have something known as flat butt. And I'm wondering, that was a joke, I'm wondering if are squats the best exercise for glutes? are, because again, you have to squat, what are other ways of getting there? And Jerry, if you can talk about, what is the proper nutrition for something, not specifically for squats, but for weightlifting?
Well, I actually couldn't. If you asked me the specifics to build a buttocks,
right?
No such animal.
That's not going to happen, right?
Right. I mean, I can't give you like a buttock building diet. I mean, that's you might find that on the internet, but it doesn't exist.
Well, you could
bottle reality.
it. You could bottle it and become a billionaire.
It probably does exist on the internet.
Right, it does. So, Jerry, so go ahead.
Well, by the way, I'm also a victim of the flat butt syndrome, and when I was a bodybuilder, I had, pretty good glutes. But, at my age, to be honest with you, I mean, even though I continue to work out, I do see signs of sarcopenia, which is, of course, for the people that don't know what that means, it's a loss of lean mass with age. And the first place I noticed it, strangely enough, was in my glutes. My glutes have dissipated to such an extent that when I sit too long, it's like sitting on bone. So I feel your pain, in other words.
Okay.
Jerry, I'm Asian, right? You know what they say about Asian men and Asian women, right? We have flat legs.
Oh, so are you in that category too, then? Huh?
You know what? Actually, I was a great squatter when I was younger, and I've maintained a certain amount of gluteal development, and I do get people, some women will tease me, say, "Hey, you have a perky butt for an Asian." I hear that all the time.
Yeah.
So I do hear your plight, though. I do hear that.
Right.
No. I'm really serious about this issue of sarcopenia. It's a very serious problem because as you age, as you know, testosterone, growth hormone, and getting older, it just the enzyme production goes down, so the bodily systems can't maintain that mass as well as it used to. So I hear your plight.
Ask me the question again.
The question is really, we're not just talking about. I mean, we're talking about glutes and we're talking about squats, but from a nutritional standpoint, what would you say is the optimal sort of nutritional program for someone who's exercising and wants to gain mass, wants to build muscle?
Well, the first thing you have to understand is that there's no set diet for everybody. There's no one size fits all. You have to take into account individual food sensitivities, food likes and dislikes. This is a problem I have with registered dietitians who often give out these printed diets, where the meals are all there's no leeway. They're all set there on paper, and half the time people won't follow this diet. So you have to take that into account. And for example, some people will thrive on low carbohydrate diets, as I said earlier. Some people will thrive on, let's say, lower fat, higher carbohydrate diets. But generally speaking, if you want to build muscle, you obviously have to keep the protein high. I mean, you also, and the protein, that's universal. Anybody who wants to put muscle mass on, whether it's the butt or anywhere else, you're going to have to eat. I think one of the third question that we're going to discuss today, I can go into more specifics about this. But let's say for now, protein has to be the key nutrient for building muscle. Okay. Now, the other two macronutrients, which is, of course, carbohydrate and fat, that's more adjustable. Now, just to use myself as an example, now, I realize that one person it constitutes anecdotal evidence. It's not really scientific. But even back in my bodybuilding days, I've never been able to tolerate much carbohydrate. In other words, all over the internet, a lot of these guys on the professional forums, they have advanced degrees. They make fun of people like Gary Taubes and the other low carb advocates, because they think that this insulin theory of fat, those insulin tends to stimulate fat. They think it's nonsensical, and they say a calorie is a calorie is a calorie. No matter what type of diet you use, the bottom line is unless you reduce calories, you're not going to lose body fat. I disagree with that completely, and I use myself. I will argue that vehemently. I don't care what the textbook. One guy quoted a biochemistry textbook, and you guys probably have read this, where de novo lipogenesis, in other words, the production of fat in the body from carbohydrate, is extremely low. In other words, if you take that one step further, they're saying it's almost impossible to get fat from eating carbohydrate, which is so laughable to me. That's ridiculous. Because I can tell you that when I compete in contests, I tried every diet known to mankind, from low fat to high fat this and that, low carb. The only thing that ever consistently worked was low carbohydrate diets.
Right.
But in relation to building muscle, that's what we're talking about here now, right? Rather than losing fat, we're talking about building muscle, right?
Yep.
In that situation, you have to, again, make sure your protein intake is high. But believe it or not, this is a time not to reduce calories too much, because if you reduce calories, it actually blunts putting size in. You don't want to overeat where you start to put body fat on, but it's actually favorable to gaining muscle size to actually increase the calories. And the increase in calories is going to come mainly from carbohydrate and fat. Now, you have to be careful there, because you have to understand most people don't get fat. It's true. Most people don't. If they consume only carbohydrates alone, you can consume a pretty good amount of carbohydrates. It's true, before you start to gain body fat. In other words, you basically have to, once your glycogen stores in your body, in your liver and your muscles, once they're filled and you eat an excess of carbohydrate, the carbohydrates have nowhere to go. They turn into palmitic acid. It becomes fat. But the point being that, if you have, on the other hand, let's say you reduce your carbohydrates, then you can have a lot more fat. But here's my point. Most people who are obese today, and I'm not talking about body, I'm just with people on the street.
Sure.
You'll find if you check their diets, nobody gets fat from eating protein. That's a huge myth. It just doesn't happen. It doesn't happen. But if you eat a large amount of carbohydrate and a large amount of dietary fat, particularly saturated fat, not the good fats like polyunsaturated fat like omega-3 and extra virgin olive oil, omega-9. In other words, if you eat a combination of high fat and high carb, you're going to gain body fat. So it's a delicate balancing act. So to put on muscle, you got to keep your protein intake high. Yeah. What I've been recommending for the last, believe it or not, 40 years, and I was very happy to see that my ideas were actually confirmed by science very recently, which I'll talk about that later. But I've always told guys who want to put on muscle, if you want to put on muscle, aim for 1 gram per pound of body weight. Okay. That's about 2.2 grams per kilogram of body weight. Sure. And in other words, the body weight goal is what you want to weigh. In other words, if let's say you're 150 now and you want to weigh 200, you want to aim for let's say 200 grams of protein. Now here again, I have a problem with some of the experts in the field. I should get into that more later, but let me put it this way. The amount of protein they recommend per meal, it's almost impossible to get 200 grams of protein. Right. So they're saying that this amount, but see what they're talking about is purely muscle protein synthesis, but there's other factors involved in gaining muscle besides muscle protein synthesis, and it gets confusing for the average person. You have to differentiate, see? In other words, they're giving set figures of let's say 30 grams of protein per meal. Right. And they're saying to eat, let's say 5 meals a day, and that's not enough really to put on a lot of muscle mass. You're going to have to eat a little more than that. Right. But that's enough to cover muscle protein synthesis, but you're not going to really gain maximum muscle mass with that amount of protein. So to answer the question succinctly, I would say to keep your protein high, again, about 1 gram per pound of body weight for whatever body weight you want to weigh. And you're going to have to experiment because, again, it's an individual thing. Some people tolerate color. 75% of the population is insulin insensitive. In other words, they're basically pre-diabetic, and most of these people don't even know it. They're walking around with fatty liver. They have no idea. And the thing is, when they eat carbohydrates, they're going to have a problem. The other 25% who are not insulin insensitive can eat a fairly large amount of carbohydrates with no problem whatsoever. And as far as the fat, again, it depends on how much carbohydrates you eat. The less carbohydrates you consume, the greater amount of fat you can take in. And by the way, even though saturated fat is associated with body fat, and the old thing about heart disease, very few people know that there's only 2 types of fat that increase testosterone or maintain testosterone levels in the body. Right. One is saturated fat, and the other one is monounsaturated fat. It's found in extra virgin olive oil and nuts. The polyunsaturated fat in vegetable oils and fish oil, that doesn't help testosterone. Only those 2 types of fat. But I still think that you want to keep a limit on the saturated fat. I wouldn't consume more than 15%, maybe 20% at most when you're trying to gain some size. You want to concentrate on the let's say monounsaturated fat because it's more readily oxidized, less chance of becoming body fat.
Okay, excellent. So Stu, with all of that information, then what are some of the recommendations of training to, and again, the flat butt thing, but what are some of the recommendations that are alternative to squats? Let's say I can't do squats. What else can I do?
Well, first of all, I have to add that I'm from Central America, so I don't have the flat butt syndrome. My butt's good, and I've never had a problem with it. But a couple of things. I wanted to say, first of all, Jerry is like dead on, and just real quick, just to touch on that before I jump into it, is I think we're talking about keeping the body anabolic. So as you're putting foods into the body through that gastrointestinal tract, digestion is going to be the key thing that's going to allow you to facilitate all of this growth. That's going to allow everything to come through. So getting to an exercise, a lot of people I see a lot of people doing like hip extensions, and the way they're doing it is they're across the bench, so their upper backs are resting, their hips are dropping way below the bench, and they're thrusting up. And while this is a very good exercise, it's actually very limited in how you can truly activate the glute. I'm a big believer in pre-exhaust. I think pre-exhaust is very safe, probably the safest way to activate fiber. A lot of reasons people can't, they don't get the type of development they want. It's because they don't really know how to contract, flex, and utilize the muscles they're trying to activate. But when you pre-exhaust the muscle, you do it an isolation movement first, and then you move on to something that is compound movement, and you get this level of synergism, activation going on. It builds better muscle. It saves the joint and allows you to tap in on a neurological level that's superior. So what I would suggest is lengthwise lying on the bench, just like if you were going to do a bench press, and take a dumbbell, put the dumbbell across the hips. You're going to get a little acupressure, which you're going to get some. If that dumbbell is heavy for most of us guys and some of us girls, it's going to push against that hip flexor. It's going to start to open up that area a little bit. As you thrust up through your heels, you're going to notice the range of motion is extremely short. It's not big. I'd suggest holding for contraction about 5 seconds and do a set that we would call accumulative reps. So it would be a contraction up at the top with a 5-second pause. Then you do 2 repetitions with a 5-second pause at the top, 3 repetitions with a 5-second pause at the top, 4, and so forth until we get to 10.
I see. Okay.
After that, my move would not be the squat. If it's glute development that you're after, I would move to what's called a Bulgarian squat, which I think is superior to squatting. Your rear leg is going to be elevated. We do this freehand, which means with just body weight, and sometimes we'll do it in the Jones machine in my gym, where you're locked in, so there's less chance of you having to worry about balance. And what we're looking for now is depth with the right lean through the torso. I remember being every time I go to LA, I might hit a party or something, and somebody's telling me, the conversation always goes to glutes, and people are talking about, the women are talking about lunges. And they'll show me what they're doing, and I'm looking at them, and they're lunging with the torso totally vertical, the knees at a 90-degree angle. You can't hit your glutes with that angle. You're not going to work it maximally. Once you start to reduce the hip movement, and that hip stays in line with the torso, you're starting to go into what would be considered something like a front squat. A hack squat and sissy squat, where the hip is now in front, in line with the torso in front. That puts all the stimulation into the quadricep. Lunges and Bulgarian squats, you want to be demonstrated like an acceleration movement where there's a little bit more of a forward lean. Now, I'm not saying excessive for people out there that are listening and think that, I got to lean all the way forward so that my chest touches my thigh. No. But you have to have enough of a forward lean so that when you drive, you're distributing the weight through the heel. That's going to activate the glute. But if you're pushing through the heel and your torso is totally vertical and you're dropping straight down vertically, you're working more quad, my friend. You're not going to get as much glute. You're not going to get as much glute.
It's great.
So,
great.
Can I just jump in here?
Yeah,
real fast?
and then we're going to take a call. Go ahead, Jerry.
Okay, I have to comment on the hip extension exercise that Stu was just describing. Not the one he did, not the one with the dumbbell, the first one where you lie crossways across the bench
Yeah.
with a barbell over your hips.
Sure.
I actually wrote an article on that specific exercise for my Applied Metabolics newsletter because I came across a study of a man who was doing that exercise. I think that exercise is derived from what they call cross fitness. I think it was developed in that type of situation. But what this guy did is he put a 250-pound barbell across his hips, and he basically crushed one of his nerves in his leg to the point where his leg was paralyzed. So,
Right.
in other words, you got to use some common sense.
Absolutely.
That exercise is not, and I think Stu would agree with me, it's not meant for heavyweight.
Right,
It's idiotic.
No,
to put a 250-pound barbell where you're depressing the nerve and cutting off your nerve force, where the guy had to be dragged out of the gym. I mean, that is what I called, and I wrote an article to warn people about that, because I see people doing that exercise all the time. Personally, my personal feeling, I think it's a crap exercise. As Stu pointed out, there's dozens of exercises that will develop the gluteus. Why would you do one that can cause nerve damage? It's idiotic.
Right,
It makes no sense to me.
You have to look
Are
at
you
movement.
talking about like a bridge with a barbell across your hips? Is that the exercise?
Yes. It's very popular today, yeah.
But 250 pounds is a little.
Yeah, 250 pounds. You're not getting enough support. The bar is too small, and what happens is it digs in too much. You need something that's either flat or something that's padded in order to get the right type of, feel.
You're absolutely right.
You're just
started from the jiu-jitsu guys. The jiu-jitsu guys that were always, and wrestling, that were always in the mount position. They need to bridge up and get the opponent off of them.
Right.
And like you said, CrossFit took that and adopted that. But yes, now I know what you mean.
Hey, Jerry, I have a new article for you to write. You know what's going to be the title of it?
What's that?
Barbell crushes dumbbell.
So, guys, what we're going to do, we're actually coming up to finishing our second segment, but we're going to take a call from Jesse in New York City. Hey, Jesse.
Yes.
Hi, you're on with the pros, and we're talking about busting some common fitness and workout myths. What's your question?
First of all, I just wanted to say that Stu, I know Stu for a long time. Stu is an excellent trainer, and but I just had one question about diet.
Sure.
A lot of bodybuilders, they eat a lot of food, 5 meals a day, taking in the calories and stuff like that. I'm a martial artist, so I'm trying to get some tips on eating for a martial arts type of physique or workout.
Okay.
So, with general health, you have to eliminate the food that you eat. So if you're eating 5 meals a day and you're not eliminating 5 meals a day, how do you deal with that? A lot of people say maybe you should only eat 1 meal a day. What's your take on that?
Okay. Thanks for the question.
Jerry, you want to jump on that? Let Jerry jump on
Sure,
that.
I can jump on that.
Go ahead, Jerry.
First of all, this notion of having to eat small meals more often, that has been a kind of axiom in dieting or for many, many years.
Yes.
However, they've shown that it's kind of a myth. You want to have regular meals, don't get me wrong, but the notion of I've known bodybuilders, Stu, I'm sure Ming, we've heard of bodybuilders eating as much as 8 to 12 meals a day. And, all right, there's small meals, but it's kind of overkill. It's just not necessary to do that. And very few people have the time to do that. Now, in relation to martial arts, you have to look at the sport itself. It's brief periods of high intensity movement coupled with brief rest between rounds. I know this because I worked with a lot of elite professional boxers in the 90s. I was their nutrition. So the diets that I designed for these boxers would be very similar to what an MMA athlete would use. And what I would suggest is, again, a focus on protein. But here again, this is a different situation. Because of the high intensity activity, you want to time the carbohydrates.
Right.
In other words, I would say, for example, before exercise, before, let's say, practice or sparring, you want to have a good carbohydrate meal about 3 hours before, to give the carbohydrates time to digest. And, before a match, if you're going to actually have a match, I would say about 30 minutes to have a quick-acting carbohydrate drink, which will bring up your blood glucose and allow maximum muscular activity. So those are so it's basically, and you can get into supplements. It gets a little complex, and coincidentally, again, I have to mention, I've collected a ton of research on nutrition for mixed martial artists, and I plan to write an article on this in my Applied Metabolic newsletter, including the major problem of mixed martial artists. And this is kind of controversial. A lot of these guys, to make weight, dehydrate themselves.
Oh, God.
And they get really messed up.
Course,
they get sick.
Yeah.
And I'm going to talk about ways to avoid that, because I have a good record with that. All the fighters I work with, which is about 20 boxers, none of them ever failed to make weight, not one single time. Right. And after the fight, when they wanted to gain weight, had a 24-hour interval between the weigh-in and the actual fight. My record of putting weight on in one day was with a fighter named Oscar De La Hoya, who wanted to put on 16 pounds in 24 hours, and I did it. And that's with no bloat, no stomach sticking out. He knocked the crap out of the guy. He wanted to gain a lot of weight because his opponent was Cesar Chavez, who we had a little grudge against at the time. He wanted to bust up his face. And he felt that if he was heavier, he would do that. But the other major issue with MMA is, of course, the head trauma. And there's ways of that's a big thing in football, of course, too.
Jerry,
the head trauma, and I believe.
Jerry,
I've also.
I'm just going to pause for a moment. We're just going to break, and when we come back, let's continue with that thought. Okay. All right, we'll be right back with the Wellness Roundtable radio show, speaking to the pros and busting common fitness and workout myths.
Atrix is one of the fastest growing companies in the footwear industry and is widely recognized as a global leader in comfort and wellness footwear products. The Atrix mission is to create the healthiest shoe on the market today with fashion, function, and quality at the forefront. Atrix designs and manufactures most types of footwear for both men and women. All styles are crafted with care to meet the highest standards in design, incorporate cutting-edge technologies, and offer unmatched customization and adjustability. To learn how Atrix can help you with your feet, go to AETREX.com. That's Atrix.com.
If you missed the Lars Larson show, you missed this.
And they will always cut a break for the liberal candidates for political office. So we have to be aware of that as citizens. If we had the kind of media we ought to have, we'd have half the reporters telling one version of the story, the other half telling the other version. You'd watch both versions, and the truth would lie somewhere in the middle. But instead, what we get is all left-wing version.
Lars Larson, After Dark, nights 10 p.m. to midnight. Independent Talk, 1100 KFNX. You're listening to Independent Talk, 1100 KFNX, Cave Creek, Phoenix, a division of Premier Radio Stations, the home of the Savage Nation.
On the News Radio, Maricopa County Attorney Bill Montgomery says no new charges in the Hamilton football hazing case.
Without admissible evidence to corroborate the information for us to present to a jury and convince a jury of guilt beyond a reasonable doubt, there's nothing more we can do within our criminal justice system at this time.
They have charged 3. Pinell County Sheriff's Office wraps up an investigation, shuts down a stash house in Phoenix.
We were able to get them driving into Phoenix, and then they stopped at this home.
DPS rescues hikers stranded overnight in the Superstition Mountains early today.
It has to be, pretty near ideal conditions to do this, and when you don't have daylight, it's very, very difficult.
Tucson firefighters had their hands full of church fire, but some police officers fought it initially.
That, potentially saved a significant amount of property damage as well as the potential injury or loss of life.
George Tanner, Arizona News.
It's time for your 1100 KFNX traffic report brought to you by unbound.org. In Tempe, we have an accident at the Loop 101 southbound at the Loop 202. In Phoenix, be on the lookout for a collision at the Loop 202 westbound at 32nd Street, as well as State Route 51 southbound at Northern Ave. We all got to where we are through hard work and a little help. Open a world of opportunity for a child or elder dreaming of a better tomorrow at unbound.org.
From the KFNX WeatherBug Weather Center, as we head into the evening under cloudy skies, showers likely, overnight low 53. Tomorrow, mostly cloudy with a chance of showers, high 65. Thursday night, mostly cloudy, a chance of showers, overnight low 50. I'm Scott Allen Fortney from the KFNX WeatherBug Weather Center.
Currently, in downtown Phoenix, it's 56 degrees.
Next news in 30 minutes or when it breaks, here on Independent Talk, 1100 KFNX.
Save more with Liberty Mutual Insurance.
Hey, what are you doing up here on the roof?
I want to tell the world I just met the woman of my dreams. Well, what about you?
I want to tell the world that Liberty Mutual saved me $782.
Liberty did what?
They saved me $782.
Oh, you go first then. $782 really puts finding love into perspective.
Visit us online to get a quote, and you could save $782. Liberty Mutual Insurance. Based on a recent countrywide new customer survey, coverage is underwritten by Liberty Mutual Insurance Company, Equal Housing Insurer.
A good night's sleep starts with the right pillow. That's where MyPillow comes in, and we're excited to announce the new 4-pack special. Go to MyPillow.com, click on the 4-pack special tab, and save 50% off the 4-pack, which includes 2 MyPillow Premiums and 2 Go Anywhere pillows. Use promo code SKY at checkout or call 1-800-635-1825. That's 1-800-635-1825. Or go to MyPillow.com, click the 4-pack special tab, and use promo code SKY at checkout.
Live from the Midtown studios of KFNX, it's time for the Wellness Roundtable radio show, sponsored by Atrix.com. Now, here's your hosts, Dr. Spear and Dr. White.
Welcome back to the Wellness Roundtable radio show. I just want to let our listeners know, if you want to call in, you can reach us at 602-277-5369 or toll free at 866-536-1100. And we're speaking with the pros, Stuart Burton, Jerry Brainham, and Ming Xu, and we're talking about busting some common fitness and workout myths. And in this next segment, I'd like to cover something that really has to do a little bit more with, I think, men of our age or maybe even older, and that is that, you know, men over 40 or men over 50, you know, there's a drop in testosterone, there's a drop in libido, there's a drop in desire, in a sense. What are some of the things that we can do to help men over 40 in terms of their fitness, and what kind of routines might be best? And I'd like to kind of start with Ming, because speaking from a rehabilitation standpoint, if you're over 40 or over 50 years old and you're looking to get into a workout routine, what are we talking about? Like, what's a safe way to kind of enter that world?
Well, we started talking about this earlier about the hydration. That's really important to hydrate properly. Like we said, start with 2 liters for the average person. The other thing that I like to mention is that people who cannot get a hold of people like myself who are myofascial soft tissue experts, you can buy things like foam rollers, or you have these things called the Fascia Blaster. You have all kinds of these products out there. There's another group out there. Her name is Julie Wu. She actually sent me a bunch of her products called Rad Tools, which is a bunch of rollers and balls of different sizes. And you can start doing some self-myofascial release to get the tissue nice and soft before you start with a fitness routine, because you have to get the quality of the fascia of high integrity before you start training. One thing I wanted to say, going back to sexy glutes, and this is obliquely part of it, if your lady friend or if even your male friends have a little cellulite on the butt, if you think about what cellulite is, it's basically connective tissue fibers that puckers the skin downwards, and it looks quite unsightly. And at least the theory is that if you can release the tension of these protein fibers of this connective tissue that's pulling on the skin by way of foam rolling or using this Rad Tools or the Fascia Blaster, you can theoretically actually smooth that out. So it'll look better, at least to the eye, and I know it will, for a fact, feel better in terms of the myofascial quality. So one thing I would definitely do is do the hydration, get the fascia nice and soft and pliable and of high quality, and then start your routine. That's how I would do it for all people, particularly people over age 40, because at age 40, I'm sure that Jerry would confirm this, that not only does your testosterone and your growth hormone levels start to drop, your enzyme productions also drop too. And when your enzyme productions drop, your body's ability to get rid of old cells and things of that nature that needs to be removed, like dead proteins, cannot be done at that age because your enzyme levels cannot handle that load. So you start having all these basically junk cells that get encrusted inside the fascia. So you basically want that out. So if you can't do it enzymatically, you should do it through manual therapy, or you could do it through this foam rolling things, and you can do it through self-myofascial release. And this way, it'll essentially help the body cleanse the fascia, if you will, through mechanical ways as opposed to through an enzyme, which we no longer have.
And so
I'm glad you said that, Ming. You know, from this is Scott, by the way. From my point of view, there's been a lot of people that don't think that foam rolling and using different types of tools can affect the fascia. So it's interesting, and it's promising hearing you say that.
Well, let me add this too. With the foam roller, you have to understand that the contact point is actually a line, but you use little balls. The contact point is a point. So you have to pick and choose what you're going to use. If there are broad areas like the IT band, you can use the foam roller. But if they're like areas that are really point tenderness areas, you really need to use like these like the rad tools I told you about, or the Yamana balls, or the fascia blaster. Or you can use even a lacrosse ball. If you don't want to spend too much money, lacrosse ball costs $3 or $4, and you just sit on that. And the reason why I think that's even more effective than using a foam roller, because the point of contact is literally a point, whereas a point of contact for a foam roller is a line, and it may be too big and too inactive, so to speak, to get to the point that you want. So you have to learn how to pick and choose which device you want to use.
Yeah. And Ming, I do something similar, which I think is great for people to know, is I actually use a kid's super ball. Those small super balls, I'll put them on an area of the upper extremity or lower extremity, depending on the size of the person or athlete, and wrap that in either almost like a saran wrap, or put that in an ace bandage, and then have them move with that. So there's a consistent point while they're going through different types of activities, so it's almost like their own active release.
That's a very innovative thing to do. That sounds actually quite intelligent. It makes a lot of sense because you want to keep the area where you want to break down the adhesion. It actually takes quite a good amount of time. I don't know if anyone knows about the Stecco family, but the Stecco family in Italy have done extensive research on fascia, and they talked about the amount of PSI, or the amount of pressure that you need, and the amount of time that you need to actually break down an adhesion. So if you just go to a massage therapist, I'm not trying to throw shade on massage therapists here, but oftentimes they will massage an area for, 5-10 seconds, and they'll move on to the next area.
Right.
It literally is not enough time.
Right.
And according to the Steccos, and according to what my experience has been, you literally have to stay on one adhesion spot, one area of interest, for as much as 3 minutes nonstop, and you literally break it down. And once you break it down, it's broken down for at least, I would say for good. When I say for good, until it reforms again, which can take a few months again to reform. However, it's not like a massage where you feel good for that day or that evening, and then, a couple of days later it feels bad again. You don't want that.
Right.
So the reason why that's the case is what Scott just said. You have to keep it at one spot and truly break it down before you move on to the next spot.
So when we all right, so now we're talking about, releasing the fascia in anyone, really, and specifically in people over the age of 40, and how to do that. That's really, really important. But what about the nutrition for individuals over the age of 40 or over the age of 50? Does it change? We talked about, you basically, we're talking about how many grams of protein per pound of body weight, and that it should be kind of equal to the target weight, what you're looking for. But what if I can't take in that much protein? I'm 55 years old. I just want to be fit. What am I looking for in terms of guidelines?
Are you talking to me, or are you talking to Jerry?
I'm talking to Jerry. I'm asking Jerry this question.
Okay. Well, first of all, there are some changes that occur after 40, and especially in relation to nutrition. There's a condition called anabolic resistance. Mm-hmm. And what this means is when you get around 40 or so, it's more difficult for amino acid entry into muscle, which makes it a little bit harder to build and maintain muscle. Now, working out helps that quite a bit, because when you work out, you increase, you make basically the muscle more permeable to amino acid entry. But in practical terms, what they found is, unfortunately, I know you just said, about the protein problem, you really do need to have more protein. In other words, for a older man to equal the level of muscle protein synthesis as a younger man, let's say a 40-year-old man compared to a 25-year-old man, the older man is going to have to take a larger dose. Let's say whereas 30 grams of protein per meal will maximize muscle protein synthesis in a younger person, the older person is going to have as much as 40 or more grams of protein per meal, again, to overcome the anabolic resistance. Another fairly interesting technique is a couple of researchers have tested the idea of consuming protein at night. You do a workout at night, and then you consume some protein right before you go to sleep. The protein of choice for this purpose is a protein called casein, which is one of two major milk proteins, the other one being whey. Casein is a slow-acting protein that's kind of curdles in your stomach. If you want to know what it looks like, look at cottage cheese. That's almost pure casein. And what happens is when it curdles, it's released. The amino acid content is released in the blood over a gradual 7-hour period. So you're feeding amino acids into your muscles all night long, and it kind of overcomes the morning cortisol rise too, which is also not very good for muscle building because cortisol is a catabolic steroid. However, an interesting study. They started this out with young men. They gave young men, again, 30 grams of casein protein. They had them work out at night. Then they took 30 grams of casein protein, and then they went to sleep. And they tested levels of, through sophisticated methods, they tested the level of, they use amino acid markers and that kind of thing. They were able to determine that having that casein actually significantly increased muscle protein synthesis in the young men. Now, knowing that older men have a little bit more problems, absorbing amino acids, they tested it with older men, and what they found is older men can get the same result. However, they need to have 40 grams of protein, minimal. In other words, here we go again. I see. In other words, the older man has to have additional, to overcome that anabolic resistance, to put a basic sentence, you have to consume more protein. That's very important for older men. And also you have the issue, of course, as was mentioned earlier, you have the hormonal issue. I mean, somebody pointed out that, I don't know if Stu pointed out that, when you hit about 40, I think Ming said this, when you hit about 40, your levels of anabolic hormones tend to decline precipitously. Well, not precipitously, gradually. After 40, your testosterone level declines 0.2 to 2% per year each year after age 40. So, by the time you're 50, you're pretty low. And this isn't with all men. I'm not saying every man, but let's say about 30-40% of men under this level. Now, the problem with that is testosterone is really needed to build muscle. So what I'd suggest is that, for example, let's say a man hasn't worked out in years, he wants to get back in shape. He might want to. There's signs of testosterone deficiency. Depression, muscle mass loss. Increase of fat around the waist. That type of thing. You could look for that, or if you're not really sure, what I would suggest men do is go to their doctor and get a blood test for free and total testosterone levels to make sure that they're at least within a certain range. Because if they're not within a certain range of testosterone, they're hitting the head against the wall. Now, as far as the growth hormone also adjusts, but that is more of a voluntary situation because a lot of people don't realize when you take testosterone or when you normalize your testosterone, it automatically increases a byproduct of human growth hormone called insulin-like growth factor 1. Insulin-like growth factor 1 is the major anabolic factor associated with growth hormone. In other words, it's actually more anabolic than growth hormone itself. So if you normalize your testosterone level, you automatically normalize your growth hormone. If you take growth hormone for any purpose, you're taking it something other than building muscle. Now, if you want to have some of the so-called anti-aging effects or whatever. Right. But growth hormone itself is not absolutely necessary for older men to, but the testosterone is important. And again, that additional protein intake, very, very important. Without these factors, men will be just slamming their head against the wall. Nothing's going to happen.
Excellent. So,
I'm ready for my filet mignon.
Yeah, right. Yeah, I'm going to be chowing down a lot of protein today. Stu, so, in terms of training people, you have somebody who's 40 or 50 years old. You're not, and listen, I can speak to this from firsthand experience working out with you and feeling like I'm going to pass out. What's the difference in the routine in terms of somebody who's older versus somebody who's younger?
Well, what we see typically is we usually find that there's a lot more stiffness to the body with most people that are coming in. I'll get a lot of my business guys and that are coming in, even some of the people that are athletically inclined. So like Ming said earlier, and I'm going to touch on real quick, and Jerry said, first thing I would suggest, you want to invest in a good trainer, somebody that can give you the right type of information. We use a product called HyperIce. It's a ball like a foam roller, and it vibrates. And so we get very deep into the tissue, so it starts to open everything up, that proper hydration. We've got to make sure saturated fat levels are good enough that the body can produce enough testosterone, like what Jerry was talking about. We find with some people coming in and them being a little bit older that we have to watch how much protein we give and calories in general, because maybe the GI tract can't tolerate a lot. Mm-hmm. So we'll start to use things like branched-chain amino acids just to make sure the body doesn't slip into a catabolic state. Allows them to take in a little less in overall calories. It keeps them lean, because most people that are coming in want to look lean.
Right.
They're not trying to look like bodybuilders. Then as far as training goes, I work with a lot of people that do a lot of different type of work. So they're working overseas. So we're looking at people with really crazy hours. And what we found that when we minimize the duration of time in terms of work, we got much better results straight across the board. There's no dilly-dallying. There's no playing around. When we come in and we implement the SAFE method, it's a method that was designed to be specific just to the individual, going in, targeting areas that we need to do, and maximizing the level of stimulation. So where we believe in half-hour workouts as far as like the length of time, no crap around, no fooling around, getting in and getting it done, it works a lot better. Once you start to get into a long time inside the gym, you're talking about the more time you spend in the gym, more time you're not recovering. So we want to try and you want to try and map out your programs. You want to see what it is that you're going to do. The focus shouldn't only be on big lifts. You want to focus on some of those small lifts. The body needs to do it all. You need the smaller lifts to get those smaller muscles so you can get the right activation, develop neuromuscular patterns. You need the blood flow, and then you need those other movements too that are going to give you power. Because if you don't try and move a little bit more weight, you will not have the power. And ultimately, if the 99-year-old woman that comes into my gym, she needs the same thing that 19-year-old kid wants. She needs power and she needs muscle. You can never have too much muscle. We build muscle. That's what we function on at Iron and Silk. That's our thing.
Right.
And as a result of that, your metabolic rate increases, and those things help. Everything works together. The body is a system. If it's one thing I have to say, and I'm going to say it all over again, all things need to be applied. This is like a physics equation. If something is not there, you're not going to get the answer. Things need to be implemented, watched, and then changed when they need to be changed, because nothing is going to work indefinitely. Everyone is unique.
Understood.
And that's the only way you're going to be able to accomplish this.
Okay.
Can I chime in here?
And we have a caller we'll take after you talk, Ming. Go ahead.
Real quickly, with Stu, you say with the older populations they tend to be stiff. What I also recommend is before they start on your training routine, that they go on a pretty decent supplement routine, mainly stuff like MSM, which is methylsulfonomethane, which offers a sulfate, which helps you actually make glucosamine and chondroitin sulfate within your body itself.
Yeah.
Collagen supplements, because it helps you build collagen, hyaluronic acid, and also proteolytic enzymes. If you give these older patients or clients of yours these things, it will tend to lubricate the joints and make the fascia work a little bit better, so your workouts will be a little bit more fruitful and more beneficial. Just thought I'd put that in there.
All of it has to be addressed, and this is what we do. It's not enough to just come in and just to lift, and you have to talk and think about again. Who we're talking about? Is it a male? Is it a female? What does the person bring to the table as an individual? And that's how our interns are taught, the trainers that are here. So we're looking at everybody from a standpoint of what do you bring to the table as an individual? What is your experience? Your advancement in trainer or lack of? Your eating patterns, all of these things, sleep patterns. And then with that, stress levels. And then you start incorporating. This is how you build out a routine. Because, anybody can sit down and write something on paper and it looks good. But once you start to implement it, it doesn't work. Because this person is dealing with overseas in Japan. This person doesn't have the sleeping patterns that someone else has. How do you get around that? How do you get that body to respond? Ultimately, the goal is to not believe in any one thing. Understand and educate yourselves on as many things as possible, and then pick and choose out of your tool chest and put that stuff to work. Because the goal is to help the person, not to believe in any one thing.
Sounds great. I mean, it's great. It's great commentary, and that's truly individualized exercise prescription. So we're going to go to a caller right now. This is Carla from Kuwait. Carla?
Yes, I'm here.
Hi, how are you?
I have to say, I am just so looking forward to your television show because this has got to be one of the greatest shows. I mean, you guys are so thorough. I don't even know if you hear yourselves. I had a question, and I think you've sort of answered it. My issue is that I'm in my early 50s. I had a hysterectomy that required cutting through the abdominal muscle, and it was a long recovery. And when I was, going back to work, I just realized the stiffness of which you spoke, the lethargy, definite change in metabolism. The consumption now of anything at all is immediate weight gain, and exhaustion to the point of even slurred speech. And basically, I'm reaching that one point now that my surgeon said after 1 year you will feel a little bit better, and I am starting to feel a little bit better, doing a little bit of exercise, but I realize that anything I do cramps me up.
Okay.
And the only thing that's been seeming to work is some stretching. So I'm wondering if I should now switch a little bit more to yoga or some of the foam implements of which you were speaking, or just in general, because I know it's hormonal since the uterus was removed, But I'm just wondering what I can do to get back in shape and get this abdominal muscle tightened again, now that it's stitching itself back together, and just to get rid of this stiffness, this absolute stiffness.
Okay. Carla, thanks so much for the question, and we're going to answer that question. We have another caller on, so if Ming, if you want to take that and just kind of briefly talk about that.
The first thing I would do is go get yourself a good visceral therapist, and also consider going on proteolytic enzymes with the help of a person that knows how to use it, usually with a naturopath or alternative doctor that understands the uses of proteolytic enzymes. Apparently, after hysterectomies, you're going to have a tremendous amount of scar tissue buildup on there from the actual the issues itself as well as the surgery. So you have to get that area moving, because if it's really stiff there, you can do all the stretching that you want. It just will not release. You also, please stay hydrated. So consider the hydration program, the proteolytic enzyme, a good visceral therapist, and get someone to work with you to mobilize that area before you do a training routine.
Excellent. Okay, we're going to take another caller. This is Sally from Phoenix. Sally, you're on with the pros. What's your question? Hi.
Hi. You guys rock. I love listening to you because I learn a lot. I have lost close to 70 pounds, and I'm over 40, and I started to use the machines. I know that if you guys are into weight training, you know who Bev Francis was. I rather look like Gladys Portuguese. I don't want to have a hand over. I don't want to have a hand over a bikini and go, dude or not. I rather look like what Jean-Claude like. So trust me. So, but the thing is, so I use machines. I'm not into free weights, and so and I know when I went to this one gym and the guy was trying to, I can't, I mean,
we
for
just
me
need
personally.
I'm sorry to interrupt. We just need a question.
Sorry.
We got about a minute and a half left of the show. Go ahead.
What kind of weight training, like stack training or whatever? Like I do 3 sets of 21. Is that too much? And the other thing is, how can I'm stuck. I cannot, it's like lose the weight. It's like I'm stuck at this 67, 68 pound, and I still need to lose weight, and I need to know what to do.
Okay.
I'm stuck.
Stu, can you briefly address that? And then
Sure.
I'm also going to tell Sally, if you want to go to wellnessroundtable.com, you'll meet a lot of experts there who can possibly help you with your questions. Go ahead, Stu. We got about a minute to go.
Sure. Okay, Sally, how tall are you?
Well, she's not on anymore.
She's not.
No.
Okay. All right. Well, what we want to do is we want to make sure, first of all, I'm a big believer in nutrition. So you want to find out what it is that you're putting in. So that's the first thing to look at, right? We want to see what are you consuming, at what time of the day are you consuming it. Next thing, check stress levels.
Okay.
You want to see things that would interfere with cortisol levels and have these things shooting up. Third, you want to add your training regimen in, but you don't want to do too much, because too much training also would cause your stress levels to increase and cortisol levels will go up as well. So instead of thinking about doing more, thinking about balance. I'm not going to say less.
All right.
Balance.
All right, Stu, thank you so much. Ming, Stu, Jerry, thanks so much. We'll be back next week with the Wellness Roundtable radio show.